When I started my business, I did not think that this is what I would now be doing, which is crazy looking back, because now I'm like, oh, wow, this is all I'm doing for the most part. But I guess everything comes full circle because now here I am working in PR.
Thanks for checking out today's episode of The Experience Curve, where we explore the personal journeys of accomplished individuals, breaking down the steps they took to get where they are, which I hope just might inspire you on your own path forward. On today's show, I'm joined by Katrina Owens, founder and publicist at Knockout Directive. Throughout this episode, we'll uncover knowing when it's time to leave a steady job and being okay with it, embracing qualities beyond the conventional CEO archetype, the importance of authenticity and transparency in building trust with clients and audiences alike, implementing a human-centric approach to business. Now, Katrina is not your typical PR consultant. She's a dynamic force in the industry, dedicated to empowering service providers and lifestyle brands with the magic of public relations. Her journey from aspiring to founder of Knockout Directive illustrates the power of aligning passion with purpose. At Knockout Directive, Katrina redefines the CEO role, emphasizing authentic client relationships over conventional titles. With that human-centric approach, she creates an environment where honesty and openness thrive, paving the way for brands to succeed. So whether you're on the brink of taking that leap of faith or simply seeking reassurance that your dreams are within reach, this episode will fuel your belief in the possibilities ahead. Hey, good morning, Katrina. Thank you for taking the time to join me today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be chatting with you today.
Me too. We had a little, offline discussion, and obviously you have a great personality, so I think you'll bring a lot of energy. So I'm excited about that. What sort of brought you into the world of PR, or maybe what resonated with you about this industry personally?
Yeah, it's funny because I've been thinking about this a lot recently, actually, because there was a good chunk of my corporate career where I wasn't working in PR anymore. I was working in more corporate marketing. But PR was the thing I wanted to do, like when I was 17, 18, like trying to pick a university program to apply to. So when I was finally going through my post-secondary experience, I really wanted to work in the sports industry. Like I actually wanted to be like a sports anchor. But in my brain, I was like, okay, PR is probably the way to like get closest to that. And I was always a really strong writer. So I was going through university and just thought to myself, like, I really want to work in the sports industry. I want to work in sports PR. And I did. I eventually started working in golf. So I'm in Canada. So I was working with Golf Canada and then later on the PGA. So there was all of these like really great opportunities for me to work with journalists and work, see that at play, but also get hands-on PR experience. And I did that for it felt like a really long time. In retrospect, it ended up not being that long because then I decided I wanted a job that felt a little bit more, quote unquote, at the time I wanted it to be grown up. In my eyes, that was working like, 9 to 5. And like, I was starting to like have a serious boyfriend at the time. This is like 10 years ago when I was like 20. Yeah, I must have been 21. And I was starting to date someone seriously. And I didn't want to be traveling all the time. I wanted to kind of enjoy my summers. So I ended up getting a corporate or a bit of a more corporate job. I was working in higher education and athletics, which, jokes on me, was like not a 9 to 5. It was like 9 to 11 p.m. But I did that for a while, getting more experience on like the marketing and event side of things. And then that experience led me to that kind of 9 to 5 eventually, where I was working in retail and real estate development and property management, a bunch of different jobs that kind of had similar qualities, but they were all like very corporate marketing, overseeing all of the marketing activities for the different brands that I was working with. And I actually like wasn't doing any PR. And that was my life probably for would have been like 5 years of like really no exposure to PR. So when I started my business, I did not think that this is what I would now be doing, which is crazy, looking back, because now I'm like, oh, wow, this is all I'm doing for the most part. But I guess everything comes full circle, because now here I am working in PR. And yeah, I just had noticed that there was a great opportunity to kind of revitalize this tactic that I find a lot of business owners in my circle weren't using for some reason. So that's kind of how I landed here and started to redevelop a passion for it.
Yeah, and I think it was your bio that said you were at that time at a quote dream job. You sort of realize, okay, the values, they're sort of misaligned with what's around you. Like, what was that situation like, and what was the sort of like breaking point for you when you said, okay, I'm out?
Yeah, really great question. So I don't know if you can relate to this, but throughout my career, I never felt like in love with my job. Like there's this tendency, or like, the media maybe tells us like, hey, you either wake up really excited to go to work or you don't, and that means you're doing the wrong thing. But I felt that way through my entire kind of corporate career. Like I had jobs I enjoyed, but I certainly wasn't like jumping out of bed excited to go to work every day. And then as things kind of moved along and I worked at a variety of different workplaces and done different teams, eventually landed at a company where I really wanted to build my future. But there were some things that were popping up when I would start to talk about my future there. I could tell there was a misalignment in what I wanted for my career and what they were kind of expecting from me. And it got to a point where, my partner, who is self-employed, kind of put the bug in my ear when I was airing some of my frustrations. He kind of said to me like, hey, what if you just did your own thing? And then you don't have to have these like ongoing frustrations or challenges with your workplace, and you can feel more aligned. And I was like, I can't do that. Like, I am not an entrepreneur, like, have never thought about it. Immediately, no. But he had kind of planted that seed, and it was kind of percolating in the back of my mind as I started to go to work and think about what I was doing at that job versus what I wanted to be doing. I was like, okay, something's got to change. And I eventually just got to a point where I felt like I was compromising so much of what I wanted for my future for the sake of this company's goals. And I just decided that that wasn't going to be the case anymore. So I left, and I left with like no plan, just left, which is not something I've ever done before, but I just trusted in that moment that I was meant to do something else, and that was going to find me if I could like put the effort in. So that was October 2022. So almost, I would say, a year and a half ago. And it's incredible, all of the things that have since happened and the company that I've built in this short period of time by just taking that like very scary leap of faith.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's for me too. Like when I was in the corporate, well, actually, it was the reverse. I was doing more freelance when I first started at college, and I didn't like not having a paycheck every, like I was on film and TV set. So you just like, okay, I'm unemployed every 3 to 6 months. I just didn't like that kind of feeling. So I kind of like gravitated more towards the corporate thing in the beginning when I was younger, like, like 23 or 20, whatever it was, coming out saying, oh my God, I need that sort of stability. So for me, like just to quit, especially at such a young age for you, was there a fear of like, okay, steady paycheck, maybe it might be 401k, health benefits, whatever you had at your job at the time? Was there a fear of like leaving all that behind, or was it like, I'm still kind of, obviously you are very young at the time, I still are, but was there a fear at that time, like leaving that behind?
You know what? In the moment, I actually was not fearful of that. And I am very type A. I like to believe I make good financial decisions. And just 3 months before I left, my partner and I had moved into our brand new home together. We were new homeowners.
Good thing you got the loan first, right?
Yeah. Yes. This is why I believe like, you know what, all these things were meant to happen the way they happen. Cause I mean, him being self-employed, obviously like that made some things challenging.
Doesn't help. Yeah.
Exactly. So it really was my work history and my job, my very nice paying job at the time that really helped us get that mortgage. But in the moment when I walked out the door and I was like, I am not going to be an employee here anymore, I actually just didn't even think about the money. I just knew I had to prioritize my mental health and myself. And I knew that I was like highly employable. So to me, it wasn't so much like, am I going to start my own business and like, am I going to bring in clients? I just knew like, okay, well, I can find another job. Like, if I can't find any clients, like I know that there's like 3 companies out there that I knew would hire me if I asked them to. So I think I was just confident in that, because I didn't know what was going to happen. But, that fear did pick up after a couple weeks. But in the immediate moment, I'm like, no, we're not worrying about that right now.
Yeah. So I totally get it. Like if you have 3 places, that's not bad,
No.
So like, what's the next step? So you're like, okay, I quit. Are you like, okay, what's like the next, can you walk us through that? Like, what did you do?
Well, it's funny. I think the natural thing to do would be like to cry or like, I don't know. I have always been really good at prioritizing my relationships, and I have always had a really strong network. So when I say I could leave and like ask 3 people to hire me, I knew that I could because I had such a strong network and I was always someone that like prioritized relationships. So as soon as I left, I called like 3 different people in my network to say, hey, I'm not sure what I'm doing right now. I'm not sure if I'm picking up clients and acting more like a freelancer or if I'm looking for a full-time job. I don't really know, but send me what you got. And by making those like handful of phone calls that really crucial afternoon, I put so many feelers out that I ended up with so many options at the time that I'm like, okay, like now you get to choose which one feels best for you, which I never had before. I'd always done things in a very like linear kind of way where, you go to one job and then you kind of outgrow that job. So you apply to another job and you get it. And like, to me, I'd never been at a point in time in my career where I could be like exploratory. And so I suddenly had all these different options. I had one in the sports industry, like in sports marketing, that I could go back to. I had, one in real estate, which was like a very formal real estate job. And I was like, okay, like now it's just up to me to decide which feels best. And that is a very powerful moment. And in that moment, I chose myself. So I was like, hey, you know what? Let's just see if I can do what all of my friends and family are telling me I can do, which is be a business owner.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, betting on yourself is sometimes the best advice you can give anyone, right? I guess to find your first client, I don't want to say it wasn't hard, but was it sort of alleviated a bit by reaching out that afternoon you did to those feelers you had?
Yeah, I think a little bit. But to be honest, my very, very first client, I had no personal connection to. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the platform, but this is great for anyone that's looking for, freelance work or trying to start their business. I used a website called bark.com. So my partner had introduced it to me because he owns a landscaping company. So when he was starting out, he used it to find landscaping work. So without going into like too much detail on it, essentially you can like submit, if you're a client and you want some work done, and this can be across industries, you submit your information, and then there's service providers like me on that platform that can pay for the lead. So I was like, okay, this feels like a good way to just kind of like start picking up some work. So I started, looking at leads on there, and I picked up my very, very first client through that platform. And she actually still works with me today. But that to me was like, okay, this is actually the first sign to me that I can do this, because now this is someone that has no idea like who I am, what my work history is. I guess she knew some of my work history. She trusted me with her marketing, but it was not a personal connection at all. So I think that was actually a very like solidifying moment for me, because I'm like, okay, people that don't know me are still really willing to work with me. So that was really powerful. And then after that, obviously there were lots of like personal connections and things that were coming through, but the confidence builder was really securing clients that weren't just a referral, because that was the signal like, okay, I can do this. I can build a brand and market myself as a service provider.
Yeah, exactly. Because like I think a lot of times you'll have people that rely on their network, and that's great to do, of course. But like you're saying, to prove, hey, this is like a cold outreach. I have no relation with this person whatsoever, and they're willing to take me on. And I don't know, they knew that you were a new business owner.
She knew. She knew.
So that helps, right? I mean, she's willing to take the gamble on everything, right? To put that trust into you based on whatever it was, a conversation, a coffee meeting, to show that, hey, she has the confidence in you.
Yeah. So I really respect her because she definitely did give me a chance, and, she really just like let me run with it. And she was probably like the best first client I ever could have asked for, because she really gave me the confidence to continue forging forward. And yeah, she is wonderful. Much love to her, honestly.
No, and I don't know like what came first, like your offerings in the sense of I believe your bio says you have like you have a holistic approach to marketing and PR, and or your branding. Like those two things I wanted to talk to you about, because I'm sure in the beginning, not sure which branding can change as you grow and evolve. But like initially, when you're saying to people like I have a holistic approach to marketing and PR, what does that sort of mean for someone listening that doesn't really understand that concept? Because I think with PR, a lot of times the listener thinks of some high-powered woman, whatever guy, whatever, with the phone and text, right? And it's more of like a like you said, like a type A approach. But when I read holistic, I think it's like, I don't know, it's like a different feel. So I was just kind of curious how you break that down.
Yeah, I love that question. For me, this holistic approach really means that it kind of translates into this other statement that I use quite frequently, which is this like big brand energy. So to me, that means every single piece of your marketing you have eyes on, and you're making sure that it's as good as it possibly can be, and it's an accurate reflection of your brand. So I find with a lot of small business owners and personal brands, which is the majority of my clients these days, is when we're just starting out, we think, okay, I don't need the website. I'm just going to have my social media because I'm not big enough yet, or I don't have enough funds or time to create the website. Or on the flip side, I don't really enjoy showing up on social media, so I'm just going to work on my website and a blog. So there's a tendency to like kind of piecemeal it, but a holistic approach means we're keeping track of all of these pieces and making sure that we're showing up on all of them and putting our best foot forward on all of them. And this is really important to PR specifically, because PR these days is so brand focused. This holistic approach actually came to me because when I started my business and had a few PR clients in the early days where I was like, oh no, am I really doing this again? I actually let them kind of steamroll my confidence, because I knew that they didn't have a strong enough brand presence, and they weren't getting the results from the PR campaign that they were wanting. And I was like, well, it's because the brand is not like, you're not doing a good job of showing up on social media and like painting yourself as the founder and sharing your story. So how can we expect like media outlets to pick you up and share your story if you're not even putting that out there first? And I knew that, but at the time I was so new into it that I kind of let them maybe tell me what's up. And so as I got more confident in my business, I realized like, no, this is now the lane that I stand in. If you're going to do PR, treat yourself like a big brand and get all the pieces and focus on growing your own social media, your website, and all of these pieces first. And that's when the really effective PR is going to come into play, because now you're doing a good job of telling your story, and that piques the interest of other people that want to share their platform with you. So that's that holistic marketing and PR approach. It's like, think about the Coca-Colas of the world. Like Coca-Cola has every piece of their brand like dialed in, like on brand, no questions asked. So start treating your own business that way and make sure every piece of you that's out there is an accurate reflection of what you're putting out.
Yeah, and even your own site, like it's confident, it's clean, you look authoritative, but kind of welcoming at the same time, if that makes sense. So because when I saw your brand for the first, or your website and your personal branding for the first time, I was definitely like, okay, this definitely is a sophisticated site, but it also looks like a person that you can relate to, if that makes sense. So I was curious, like how did you, again, doing this for other people, but for yourself, coming up with that brand identity?
Yeah.
And the name, Knockout Directive. I think that's a cool name too.
Okay, let's start with the name because there's a good story behind that one. So, in that conversation that I kind of referenced earlier while we were chatting, where my partner had kind of put the bug in my ear about, like, hey, you should start your own thing, I'd said to him at the time, well, I already know what I would call my own business if I had one. And he was like, okay, what's that? And I'm like, well, I'm not sure entirely what it would be, but it would have the word knockout because my name's Katrina Owens and I've always kind of gone by my initials, KO. I've used them as a sign off. My university friends call me KO. Like, it's kind of like I have so many things with my initials on them because they're pretty good initials to have, honestly. Shout out to my parents. So I knew that word resonated with me. And then we kind of workshopped the directive part because it's so common to call yourself like an agency, or people love to use the word collective. And actually, a lot of times people will make that misconception with my brand and call me Knockout Collective. And I'm like, we're not a collective. There's just one. It's just me. So there's really common words that people use in the marketing space. And I knew I needed to do something a bit different to stand out. So directive means, like, by definition, like a piece of information that's authoritative and basically providing direction. So I'm like, this is what I do. Like, at the time, I was really coming off of being a marketing director. So I'm like, what I do is essentially, for lack of better phrasing in this moment, tell people what to do for effective marketing and PR. So that's what the company is going to do. And it's funny because that's the name. And sometimes I feel like maybe there is this kind of disconnect between the name and the visuals. So the very first iteration of the brand was actually very boxing oriented. But I used to box like a long time ago, but as I kind of moved through my personal brand journey, that vision was not really vibing with me anymore. It was like a lot of blacks and whites and it's really stark. And it was really hard for me to create content because I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. This like doesn't really feel like me, but this is kind of the brand that I'd come out with. And then I just let myself develop a brand that I really loved. So to your point earlier, like most people's impression of a publicist is like someone that is, metropolitan and maybe a bit aggressive in tone. And that was something that I just never related to. And that's never going to be me. I do have a very like warm demeanor, and my clients, like the common thread that they all say is, you have genuine care and you're so friendly and approachable. So I wanted to make sure that was communicated through the visual brand. And to me, that is like this warm, like beachy, relaxed vibe. So that really was like the visual component for me. Yeah. So that's kind of how I developed that part. And then now to me, like, who doesn't want to be a knockout? I mean, whether we're boxing or like, just kind of showing up as our best selves, I really think that word can kind of resonate with a lot of people. So I'm sticking with it. It relates to me, but there's still some separation between myself and the brand, which is always important. Because I always think like as personal brands, you want to have a bit of differentiation from this thing you're creating. So yeah, does that answer your question? That felt like a
No, 100%. Yeah. And you have the .com, so that helps as well, right?
Yes, exactly.
And you're right, though. I think when, in my experience, or just, movies, TV, whatever it might be, you always see the PR lady like screaming on the phone and right. So it is like kind of refreshing to see, okay, this is not all of us.
Well, yeah. And I think that's a really intimidating impression for a small business owner. And right now, a lot of like the core of my business is this PR education component. Like I say, I do not gatekeep any information on public relations. I want people to understand what it is. And the experience I had with most clients early on is they'd tell me, I used to work with this PR agency or this publicist, and I never really knew what was going on. Like they never really shared a lot of this information with me. And so that really inspired me to like take this more like informative, educational approach, because I feel like we need to know, like business owners are going to be more powerful and more successful if they know that all of the ins and outs of what PR actually is. So that all kind of plays together. I want everyone to like feel like they can ask me questions and create a space for that.
Yeah, and I did want to ask you about transparency that you referenced, but before I moved on from the brand, I did want to ask you like how did you leverage personally social media in the beginning to kind of if that helped you grow your business?
Yeah, so it's so funny because a year ago, if we would have had this conversation, I had no social media presence. I had like less than 100 Instagram followers and I hated posting on anything. I was like scared, nervous, insecure. I just like I did not have a handle on it. And in the past year, I've just, really kind of come into my own, but through a lot of help. I've invested in content programs, and I actually work with a content coach on developing content that better reaches an ideal client and helps me communicate my services better. And now I book between 3 to 5 discovery calls every single week through Instagram. So I never thought that that was going to be a platform that I would even like secure any business through. And now it's become a main kind of medium of finding clients or clients finding me. So I realized its power, but I've spent a lot of time really perfecting it and perfecting like how I kind of show up and communicate who I am and what I do. Yeah, that's a really interesting journey, but I do see the power of social media marketing now. And my following is not that big. I think on Instagram, I have about 1,100 followers right now. So have come a long way since like less than 100 at this time last year. Yeah, those are pretty good results. But my audience is really, really engaged with my content. So for me, I actually don't even crave like a larger audience because I want everyone to feel like they can participate with me and ask me questions and all of that. And I feel like I've now built that. So I see this thing because I do have a lot of clients that have social media, or I do have a lot of social media clients that have large followings, and there becomes a drop-off point where their following becomes so big, their engagement starts to decrease. And, whether that's a direct correlation between how much sales or conversions they're also receiving, it's hard to know. But I actually love this kind of era of like the micro influencer because I myself can see the benefit of like having a small, but like really, really engaged and excited following. Like I feel like I'm friends with all of my followers.
No, that's huge. If you can have that kind of connection with your audience, most people, like you said, they have these huge followings, but the engagement is so low or just drops off that the way you're doing it seems a lot more effective.
Yeah. And it's all honestly by strategy. Like I have a very specific strategy on like how I show up and communicate and like share value. So we always talk about like, okay, you got to share value. You go on a podcast, you do a speaking engagement. What value are you communicating? People talk about that, but they don't tell you like what that actually looks like. We start using this term value as like a buzzword. So that's where I've started to kind of take a lot of my content is like, okay, we're not just like describing things. Like I'm here telling you exactly what it is and how to do it. And I think that's what gets people most interested in my content is because I'm no longer just, if I look at other people in my industry or competitors, a lot of their content is just describing like things that you could probably Google online. And I don't think that that's the most engaging kind of content. Like anything I post, you're probably not Googling. And if you are, I want to know where those websites are, but I don't think that it's out there. So I think that's why people find my content so interesting. And I actually see, for me, I do not care about how many likes my content gets. I love comments, but to me, they're not a driving force of success. I actually go into all of my posts to see how many saves posts have gotten on Instagram. Because to me, if someone has saved the post, it's because they found the information in it valuable and they want to reference it, later on, or the next time they need some inspiration or looking for some, advice on a very, very specific topic. So to me, that's how I know I've delivered value. Because if people are saving my posts and saving my content, I'm like, okay, that one hit. More of that.
No, you did touch on that earlier. You said the word transparency, which I wanted to get back to, a strong commitment to transparency. You have, you share your secrets, right? So how do you think that would contribute to building trust, not only with an audience, but also with your clients?
Yeah. So it's been a really interesting experience over the past couple of months where I feel like my content has gotten so engaging and informative. And it was, all intentional because I've developed a couple publicity coaching, personal branding programs that target a smaller business or someone that, is maybe earlier on in their career. And those programs require a ton of trust building to sell, because I'm expecting someone that, might not be super far along in their entrepreneurial journey or in their business to invest in my programs. And they got to know that I know my stuff. So I got to a place where I was like, okay, I actually don't care if I'm giving away too much information, because to me, this is just showing my ideal client how much I know. And I see it every time I post something that's like, speaks to maybe some of the results or some of the value that's inside one of my programs. I'll immediately have someone book a consultation with me or slide into my DMs to ask more questions, because now that's showing them that, hey, I'm not just all talk. I can actually give you more of this when we're working together. And I didn't understand that in the beginning of my career. I really think it takes time to understand how you can activate your audience. And I think if anyone out there is kind of feeling like, oh, I'm not seeing those kind of results from my content, it just means that you probably need to invest in some tools or some resources to get a bit better at communicating those things, because anyone can do it. I always say I'm not special. I just got really good at my strategy. And yeah, building that trust has been like a complete game changer. I don't think that we can just expect people to sign up for our services or buy our digital products these days. Like, people are much more discerning with their money and where they're spending it. So building that trust and really consistently showing up and speaking to the value you provide is going to be the game changer for your business.
And working with a coach too. I think that a lot of people would shy away from that, but it doesn't mean it's not negative. It's like, hey, if this person can help me enhance what I'm doing to kind of pull things out of me I didn't know were there, why is that? Why wouldn't you do that?
Yeah, exactly. And actually, because I used to feel a bit self-conscious about it, where I'm like, okay, the marketing consultant is hiring a consultant. But at the end of the day, like, I say this to my own clients. Actually, a great example of this is I had someone ask me a couple weeks ago. I'm a big fan of competitor analyses, and that is one of my main talking points or areas of discussion with clients. And this potential client actually asked me, like, well, like, what is the value in you doing a competitor analysis if I've already done one? And I'm like, well, I see it among all of my clients. Like, we're just too close to our competitors. We're too close to our business. We need a third party to be able to kind of pull back the curtain a bit and say, from a very neutral Switzerland perspective, here's how your competitors are coming across, and here are the opportunities for you to kind of stand out and do something differently. It's really hard to see it when you're in it. And I tell my clients this because I have experienced it. And that is why I work with, coaches and consultants myself, because I know to be a good marketer, that neutral perspective that has no emotional connection to what we're looking at is really valuable.
Yeah, outside eyeballs that are just like completely like non-biased is right. Like that's great advice to have. How about just like a typical like day to day or of your life, of your work life? Is it different every week? Do our clients like different projects that you're working on or advising? What is like a glimpse into like the behind the scenes of the Knockout Directive?
Yeah, it's really different every single week and every day. There are some days when I will just do like straight Zoom calls all day long. Those are usually days when I'm doing some like coaching or consulting or chatting with new clients. I usually have 1 or 2 days a week when I leave the house. So I'll go to meetings or I'll go to an event or something to gain that kind of outside exposure. And then I probably have 1 or 2 days at home where like no one is on Zoom with me. No one is seeing me on social media because I'm deep in a client strategy. So I really try to achieve balance like across the board. So much of my work takes me going out and like experiencing things in real life and having conversations. But I do a ton of strategy work, and that just requires like no interruptions. Let me get in the zone and like stay in my sweatpants all day. So it is so like people always say, oh, my job is different every single day, but mine right now truly is.
Yeah, and I having that sort of like change and just not having monotony for a lot of people, I think is just, it's mentally helpful, right? You're constantly not just sitting there doing the same tasks over and over and over and over. And I think that's probably part of like being an entrepreneur, is that kind of freedom to say, no, I'm going to set this day just to do that, or I'm going to set that day to do that. And you're able to sort of find what works for you because you're the boss, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny because I've gotten really good at like schedule optimization is what I call it. I wasn't always this way, but now I know that it is really hard to actually like if you did a bunch of Zoom calls or like a podcast or something, I probably do not have the bandwidth to do like deep thinking or like crush out a big project in the same day. Like you're using different parts of your brain and like it's just not conducive. I used to just like jam pack all like whatever fits into a day, let's just do it. And then by the time I actually had to get to like working, and to me, working is like, creating the strategy or the social media content, I couldn't do it. So I realized I had to get better at like organizing my time, which is now why I'm like, okay, there are days when like you cannot reach me. And that is because I'm like working on something and determined to get it done like as efficiently as possible without like getting distracted by all these other conversations or whatever. So that takes a while to master. I'm still trying to master it, but I'm definitely close.
Yeah, you're getting there. Well, and speaking of like doing well, like you had, I think it was $15,000 revenue months in just like 3 months of starting your business. And again, starting from, a website where, your partner had connected you right to what sort of like strategies or even mindset shifts kind of put you in that zone to be like, take off so quickly.
Yeah, I said yes to everything. Like, I look back at my calendar at that time of year and I worked all hours on weekends in the evening. Like, I look back and I'm like, I'm exhausted looking at that because I am much better at balancing my time now. But at that time, I was so committed to just growing my business and trying to figure out what works. And I really believe in like growing fast and failing fast and then like growing from that. And so that's what I did. Any client that wanted to work with me, I said yes. Any event I got invited to, I went to. I really like fired on all cylinders and then I got really burnt out. And that was actually okay. Like I look back and I don't regret any of that. I did get like really sick for like probably a week and a half at the tail end. And that was when I realized, okay, some things have to change. But I was so happy for all of that growth in a very short amount of time because it taught me so much. I'm very lucky to have a lot of flexibility. I don't have kids. My partner's also self-employed, so there's a level of understanding that hustle. So there was nothing kind of pulling me in other directions saying like, okay, now you got to focus over here or over here. I was really able to just like dive deep and like run with it. And now I run my business quite differently. I do not say yes to every project or client that kind of comes my way. I'm very protective over like the me time in my schedule, but any business owner that's curious about like growing really fast, that's my suggestion. Like say yes to everything and like make it a priority. we've like kind of glamorized hustle culture a little bit, which isn't really my jam, but I see the value in it for sure. Like it led to like amazing results in a short amount of time.
Yeah, I mean, exactly like you said. It's hard to say no in the beginning because you don't know what client that you turned down might just, like you said, be there 2 years later, still like, I was here from the beginning. And people could turn those down and not realize the potential of like, hey, this could be a lifelong client, but you never know, right? But again, the burnout is obviously something physically you felt, emotionally, mentally, and that's also not a good path to go down. And you do, I read something in your, I think it was in your bio, the notion that debt is bad is not necessarily true. And in reference to like investing in your business's future, can you like explain or elaborate on that?
Yeah, that was a quote from an article or an interview that I did. And
That's where I read it. Yeah.
I'm
I tried to read all your.
yeah, so well prepared. It's funny because every time I broach this, I'm like, is this the episode my parents listen to and like have a full like breakdown about? But regardless, okay, so I grew up with under this kind of notion that debt is bad. You do not carry credit card debt. You do not have a car loan. You pay off your mortgage as fast as possible. All those things like, and that is what my parents did. And, they created a lot of wealth for themselves and have created a beautiful life. And that was what I brought into my business where I was like, okay, like, here's an expensive PR software that all the PR pros are using, but that's like me putting it on a credit card and hoping that it pays itself off because having that software means I can, do better work for my clients, get more referrals, etc. So I had actually, probably since that interview too, I've definitely been able to transform a lot of my thoughts around debt. I actually don't really use the word anymore at all. I call everything an investment because debt implies, at least to me, that it was a poor financial decision. And I know that I don't make those. Everything that I make is an investment. Even if it's not like an investment that has an amazing ROI, will I learn something from it? So an example is I invested quite a lot of money into paid advertising a couple months ago. And to be truly transparent, I did not see a single return from that investment. And I got really hard on myself. Like, how could you? Like, now you have to pay this off. And like, you put yourself into the red a little bit to experiment with something. But I learned so much from that because at the same time, I knew I was investing in paid advertising to see if it would benefit my business. And I could tell that it wasn't. And me having a marketing background, understood the analytics more than most people. So I, at the same time, could see the writing on the wall that that wasn't going to be the game changer for my business. So at the same time, although it was even more money out, I invested into my organic social media content by working with a coach and doing some programs. And that is when my social media content started to become a major lead generator. So I look at all of that as like, yes, I spent a ton of money at that time in my business, but it was all an investment into learning what was going to work for my business moving forward. So whenever something comes to me as like an opportunity to spend money, because it comes to us every single day. Every day I have like an invitation to this class, or like PR has a lot of paid media placement, which can be beneficial, can be not, but you weigh what the benefits would be of that placement. So there's opportunities to spend money every day. So choosing what you are going to invest in makes you feel like you are empowered to make the choice. Whereas like debt feels like I'm taking on more debt. It feels like it's really like heavy and like just like a bad decision. It carries this insinuation of like being a bad decision. And I don't think that our business decisions are necessarily bad. They're just investments and like opportunities to learn. So that's my take on debt. I don't know what my parents think about that one, but I'm sure I'll find out eventually.
No, I think most parents, they have that kind of, you don't buy, like you said, don't lease the car, don't, right? And investing is a great mindset shift to think of this same transaction as it's a learning process. Like you said, okay, you learned that maybe paid ads were not what you need, maybe in 5 years or 2 years or 6 months or whatever, they might be huge for you. And you might say, okay, I learned them by testing them when I did, right? And now I don't have to spend the money learning how to do it. I can just jump, like, who knows? But having that coach, obviously the organic social media is, you're seeing the benefits of it right away. So again, I like that mindset of, basically investing in your business and in yourself, right? Because that's ultimately what it is. And for you, like as a person, I believe the adjectives you use are, like, you lead with ambition, kindness, empathy, things. When, again, going back to the PR prototypical, like, the typical PR person and or just a CEO in general, are not what we usually think of, like those words. What do you think of, like, the blending of those qualities? How do you think that's effective in you, like in leadership that you have?
I always say there's a different style for like every client and every, employee. That's why I feel so confidently that like there's no such thing as like oversaturation, right? Because that's one of the first things that trips people up when they're starting their business. Like, oh, the market's so saturated, how could I like actually stand out? I'm like, well, a lot of that goes into your inherent qualities and how you work with clients. So for me, I know that the clients I attract through being empathetic and understanding and warm, those are the kind of clients that I attract. They also share those qualities, and those are great people to work with. And I think corporately, we are seeing this shift to leaders that have more of these like soft skills that at one time were kind of a sign of like weakness. But now I actually think that they're a true sign of strength, because being able to lead with compassion or love when you're navigating a hard situation is not easy. And I think anyone with like a romantic partner or a family member or anything can appreciate that. Like, in any situation where we have to like be compassionate and like lead with our love and understanding first is hard. So I admire leaders that can do that, especially because now they also have to go against the grain of like, okay, these are not normal qualities that a leader might typically have. But because I'm showing them, now I'm inspiring others to also lead this way. So I think that's why we're kind of seeing this shift, which I think is really cool. So I always wanted to be someone in a leadership position. I always wanted to be like a CEO, and I suppose now I am one. So for me, those are qualities that I want people that work with me to like get right away. And I think that's why people trust me very soon, is because I've established this like baseline, like, we're leading as good humans, and then we're going to do a great business together. Like, I'm so non-transactional when it comes to who I work with. I want everyone to feel like this is a relationship at its core, and now we're going to help each other have amazing businesses and make money and feel fulfilled. That comes second. Like, let's just all try to be good people first, because I think sometimes we forget that part.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And I think, and building on that, you have like this goal to empower like 100 small business owners with, the magic of PR. How did that come about? And is that sort of like basically like what we're talking about right now, that sort of empathy and...
Yeah. So it came to me back in the fall. I did a speaking opportunity at like a small networking event, and there was an older man there who's probably in his like late 60s, early 70s, and has obviously had a successful career himself. And he asked me what my presentation was about. And I said, it's about public relations. And he turned to me, looked at me, and said, you do know this is an event for like micro businesses, right? And I was like, yeah, that is why I'm here. Like, thank you so much for coming. I'm about to blow your mind. And it was at that moment where I was like, yes, like there is such a misconception about what PR is and how it can benefit businesses. And most small businesses, even myself, did not know that PR was going to be this accessible tactic to me as my business grew. And so when I talk about PR, just so the audience knows, I look at PR as so many things. It's going to events and networking. It's doing podcasts. It's getting invited to do speaking engagements or workshops or even hosting your own. It is going on TV and getting interviewed and all this stuff. Like, it's all those traditional things plus like the key relationship building components that we kind of toss to the side. And for me, I wanted to show business owners that it was possible for anyone to get on a podcast or even to get on TV. I love telling business owners how they can get on TV. So I wanted to make sure people knew that those were things that were accessible to them, because I noticed that no one else was really saying that. So I just picked a number. I'm like, hey, you know what? Now let's like reach for 100. And then at some point, I'm sure it's 500, etc. But I started intentionally creating a bunch of programs designed for smaller businesses and personal brands and service providers to start to learn what it looks like for them. And really, my goal is to get 100 people through those programs so we can measure the impact of their results, because I'm sure that's going to be a really cool study.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, especially if you like to go into the analytics and all, it's like right up your alley, right?
Yeah, totally. I already can't wait. I've been lucky enough to already put so many people through my programs that I'm like, okay, like this is going to be really fun to recap like at the end of the year or whenever that time comes.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And you said speaking engagements a couple times, which you do. I tell on your website you're a self-proclaimed stand-up comic. So like, how do you sort of like leverage these opportunities? Obviously, they're good for your personal brand, but also, you know, the visibility of Knockout Directive for people listening that are like, I'd like to go and speak about my expertise. Like, what sort of like channels do you take to secure these engagements?
Yeah. So with speaking, you have to position yourself as a speaker first. So one of the key moments in my brand building was back in December. I was redoing my website to what it is today. And I thought to myself, I'm going to put a speaker page on my website, because all of the kind of inspirational people that I look at that have careers that I'd love to have, they all have a speaker page that is obviously really full of content. And I was like, I'm going to create the speaker page. I'm going to build it out. And then even though I don't have anything booked, I'm going to fill it up, but I'm going to start telling people that I'm a speaker. Because at that point I had done like 3 speaking engagements and I really loved it. And I'm like, okay, I want to do more of this, but you have to tell people that you want to do more of that. And we forget that we have an amazing platform at our fingertips. So if anyone does want to become a speaker, well, the first step is to start showing up like one. So that is showing up on your social media and talking to the camera or going on podcasts. The more that people see you speak about the topics you're passionate about, the more you'll be top of mind for when they start planning events. One of the greatest misconceptions is that, okay, there's an event that's being promoted. I'm going to pitch myself to speak at that event. But usually when it's already being promoted, that speaker lineup is already secured. So you have to do a ton of legwork to build up a brand so that you're top of mind when those events are being planned. And they're happening every day. And like there are smaller events or larger events, but you really need to start showing up like that person and telling people that, hey, I'm a speaker and I could speak at your next event about this. And that's when those organic opportunities are going to come to you. Obviously, you can pitch yourself to conferences and, you know, larger events. And that's something that I do too. But I do tell anyone that really wants to be a speaker, if you're not already receiving like organic invitations, then there is probably a brand problem. Like there's something we need to work on so people will start recognizing you for the topics you speak on. Because when you start receiving those opportunities, that's an amazing sign that your brand is working and that people are resonating. And then they're like, hey, yeah, I want you on my stage. So that's kind of the starting place for like anyone that wants to become a speaker. Work on it on your own brand first. We all have social media. We all have a platform we can start to build out. So that's where you start. And then you'll be amazed at where all the opportunities start coming from.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Yeah, because so many people do want to do that. And it's great for your, like I said, your brand. And we talked a little bit about burnout before, and I wanted to ask you one last question about that. How do you personally unwind and separate from the Knockout Directive?
I've had to maintain very strong work-life boundaries. So I obviously live and die by my schedule. So when I see that my workday is supposed to end at 4:30, it ends at 4:30. Doesn't mean I won't like maybe check my email if I'm just waiting for something, or maybe I'll work on some of my own social media content. But that is when I am stepping away from the computer and I'm not taking on like any last minute work to try and like squeeze things in, or I'm not scheduling things like into the evening. Maintaining those boundaries is something I did not do when I first started my business, and I would work into the evenings or like, on weekends. And now I just guard my time so much more because I know that I produce the best results when I can feel well rested and have time to kind of recoup the energy. So strong work-life boundaries and just like time block everything. I literally color code all the different types of things in my calendar so I can clearly see like, this is how much I worked this week. This is how much time I spent on Zoom calls. This is how much I exercised. Like it's all in there, and it's going to give you like, it stares back at you as like, hey, this is how you spent your time.
Accountability.
Exactly.
And how about for people listening, like how can they reach out and connect with you? Obviously your website, social, like where would you direct people that want to work with you?
Yeah. So the best way to work with me is to head to my website and you can book a discovery call. And that's your way to like get in front of me as soon as you can. But if you do want to just chat with me a little bit more, I'm really active on Instagram at Knockout Directive. So people can feel free to follow and send me a message and we can chat a little bit. LinkedIn's also a great place too. I'm trying to be more active over there, but some weeks I'm really good at it. Some weeks I'm not, but yeah, they can message me over there too to find out more.
Cool. I'll throw those links in the show notes. Thank you so much for your time today. I mean, you have a great personality. It's been great in hearing your story. You're just like full of energy and inspiration. I do appreciate you taking the time today to kind of just break down how much you are well versed in business for people listening to learn from. So thank you again for your time today, Katrina.
Me too. Thanks, Joe. This was really awesome.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to this episode of Experience Curve. Please take the time to share this podcast with a friend or colleague to help get the word out about my show.